the report is not liked. Verses 21 through verse 23.
So the servant came and reported this to his master. Then the householder, in anger, said to his servant, "Go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in the poor and maimed and blind and lame." And the servant said, "Sir, what you commanded has been done, and still there is room." And the master said to the servant, "Go out to the highways and the hedges, and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled."
All right, the servant comes and says the folks that are supposed to be there won't come. And the host is angry and tells him to go out now into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in the poor and the maimed and the blind and the lame. Now, we're living in America in which even the poor can get Social Security and other governmental aid and live better than the average person lives who has an income and works in many foreign countries. There are still countries in the world in which the annual income per person is $125 a year, and a few places even less. There are a great many countries in which the annual income would be about $400 to $500 in a year, about what an American assembly line worker might earn in a good week. And it's impossible for us to realize what this means. But in Calcutta, India, there are people who have been conceived on the streets, born on the streets, lived on the streets, and die on the streets, and neither their grandparents, nor their parents, nor themselves, nor their children ever in their entire lifetimes ever have an address to which mail could be sent, or would ever have any way of being located or found because they have no home. They're living out in the lanes, living out in the streets, living out under the hedges. And there were people in this distressed condition in Jesus' day, and Jesus said that there are people who have the privilege of hearing the gospel, of being invited, and they turn down the opportunities that come to them and heard the gospel over and over again and do not respond. And he said, go out into the highways and the hedges. And we're seeing, friends, today that around the world some of the greatest revivals that are occurring in places like New Guinea. I was there in World War II and walked out one time by the airstrip near Hollandia. And I was alone. I'm not sure that was wise to walk in the countryside at that time, but all of a sudden I was aware I was being watched. I hadn't seen a thing yet. And all of a sudden I looked up and looked around, and here, totally motionless, just like if you came on a group of deer and startled them before they fled, here was a man standing about, he would have been about armpit high to me, and over a little ways away, maybe 20, 30 feet, was a woman, and I presume their child, a boy about the size of an American 9-year-old. And they stood totally motionless, but looking directly at me. It so happens that today, that due to the Wycliffe translators and some others, there is the heaviest concentration almost per capita of missionaries in New Guinea in the entire world. There's about one missionary for every 635 people. And some of the greatest revivals of our generation are being held here in New Guinea, where whole tribes are coming to God. And in America, with Christian telecasts, Christian radio, Christian magazine, Christian newspapers, and a Christian worker for about every 700 people in the entire country, or even a higher ratio than that, better ratios than that. Here in New Guinea, a larger percentage of the people are now Christian than there are in parts of America. A generation ago, they were cannibals, headhunters. Today, they're believers in the living God. And this is exactly what is being said here, that there are men who have heard the gospel and rejected it. And God is going to fill his feasts. He's going to the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in. One more illustration. A number of years ago, it was my privilege in a famous assembly in Los Angeles, Bethel Assembly, Bethel Temple, to be on the platform with a national from Mexico. I do not mean a European Mexican. I don't mean a Spanish American. I mean one of the primitive Indian tribes that are still out in some of the mountains. This man wore a single garment out of a continuous piece of cloth, very much like the dhoti, D-H-O-T-I, that would be worn in India. And it was gathered between his legs and tucked in around his waist. And the only evidence he had any contact with civilization at all is that his sandals were made from a discarded automobile tire. And of course, this person could not speak English. He had to be interpreted, could not even speak Spanish. He had to be interpreted into Spanish, Spanish into English. I had been attending one of our great American universities in preparation for my schoolwork at that time, and many of my professors were very able and good men, but by no means evangelical Christians. And I sat on that platform and thought about the fact that as far as God was concerned, that the skeptical, unbelieving, agnostic profs I'd had in the university were not my brothers in Christ. And that this almost illiterate, former drunken, machete-wielding Indian from the interior of Mexico was my brother. And that in the world to come, he would be the one that would sit down with me at the banquet table of Christ. And this is what we're talking about here. He said, go out on the highways and compel them to come in quickly. Bring the poor, the maimed, the blind, the lame. And the servant said, we've done it. There's still room. And then he said, highways, hedges, compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. Friend, you may not have listened to the gospel invitation. You may not have accepted it. But somebody's going to. Somebody's going to. If you don't take your place, it will go to someone else. And now again, we have this principle at the end, for I tell you, none of those men who originally were invited shall taste my banquet.
Now we trust that you've taken your notes and you're now ready to take our TV Bible exam, which is coming right up.
Jesus said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not." Jesus said, "Jerusalem, your house is forsaken, and you will not see me until you say, 'Be he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Jerusalem, your house is forsaken, and you will not see me until you say, "Blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord." In the United States, your legal residence is where your bed is. Where was your legal residence in New Testament Israel? Where you ate.